This is the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. So in the last few episodes of the podcast, we did a deep dive into Chapter 3, which really, in my mind, is a way to hold a mirror up to your own life, to your own behavior, and really start to question and be honest with yourself about if alcoholism is something that you struggle with. And I've been thinking about how to or where to go with the podcast next for quite some time. And I think the logical next step to me seems to be that in the instance that you were exposed to Chapter 3 for the first time, and maybe for the first time in your life, you did start to question your situation, I think the most important follow-up to any set of questions or self-reflection is to paint a picture for you, the potential alcoholic, of what treatment options that you might have in front of you. Because everyone's story is a little bit different. Everyone's situation is a little bit different, and everyone's desire and capability to enter into a life of recovery might be a little different. So in the course of my 12-year battle with alcoholism, I have been fairly well exposed to a wide range of treatment options. And so I just want to go through those with you as you continue to reflect on your own behaviors, on your own thought patterns. I see it as, now that we've covered some of the most important and honest literature about the traits and behaviors of alcoholism, I really want to make clear, or as clear as possible to you, the paths that you could take in your course of action. If you decided that you believe you're an alcoholic and you want to pursue a life in recovery or to pursue the solution. So the way that I've structured this one today is I'm going to list out the various approaches and alternatives based on how I see them, kind of balancing out between how disruptive they are with regards to your normal everyday life, coupled with how much of a monetary expense that you may have to pay, because that is always a question that people come up with during this time. And quite frankly, like it's a point that I've used as an excuse in the past. And so I definitely do want to address it and just kind of give a broad overview of what sort of expense that you might expect based on the possible solution that you want to pursue. I do have a note that I want to highlight on the monetary side of things. But first, before we get in, I will discuss treatment modalities and kind of like a high level overview of them. I absolutely will not discuss any medications or drugs that may get prescribed in the course of pursuing your solution and your path to recovery. I am not a doctor. I absolutely refuse to pretend to be one. And so all of the prescribing of various drugs will be left to the professionals. But do know that that is a tool set that all of these solutions have in their belt, is to provide and prescribe prescription drugs. So again, I'm not going to get into it anymore outside of that little PSA. So on the money subject, I really want to stress and highlight that money should not be a consideration when it comes down to your ability to heal. Even the most expensive and seemingly outlandish pursuits and alternatives in this list all have methods for you to cover your costs. The genuine people in this space and in this world truly just want to see you heal and want to see you get better. And there are always ways that the monetary side of the house will get taken care of. I know, not everyone might have the greatest insurance coverage or anything like that, but on the flip side, you will be surprised how these treatment centers can work with the insurance companies, and they, in all honesty, are experts at managing that world. But along with that skill set does create some perverse incentives. So I do want to call out that anytime you see companies get involved on the insurance front, always know that there is risk of fraud. And unfortunately, the world of recovery is not immune to that. So in addition to covering the various alternatives that you may pursue during this podcast, I am also going to give you and highlight a few kind of indicators that a certain method or even like a certain therapist might not be in your best interest to pursue. There are some clear indications that say like a rehab center is a little more on the fraudulent side than genuinely concerned and focused on your recovery. Before jumping in here, I have one final note. And I just want to say that for anyone considering this next step in their lives, I want to highlight that whatever you do from this point forward, this will be the bravest act that you ever take up in your life up to this point. I guarantee it. Given everything that we've been through over the last year and a half and over the past 12 plus years of struggling with alcoholism, to this day, I believe the bravest thing I've ever done is walk through the doors of North Point, the rehab facility that I went to out here in Boise. Do not downplay how difficult this decision is, and give yourself credit where credit is due. You are truly incredible for being at this point in your consideration of seeking help. So to start, I just want to say there is a resource. There is a channel if you feel like you need immediate help. There is a phone number to dial, 988. This is the Suicide and Crisis Hotline. You or a loved one, if you are truly struggling, should always have this in the back of your mind. I know and can speak to the fact that when you're at your lowest point, that phone can weigh 5,000 pounds. And oftentimes, in my case, I would just ditch it entirely and not have it anywhere near me. But I would be absolutely mistaken not to throw that resource out there, 988, the Suicide and Crisis Hotline, to start this all off. So first, I'm going to cover some what I'm calling open resources that are basically attend when you like. They are zero upfront cost, and they are no cost to you really in perpetuity. So the two resources that I highlighted here are Alcoholics Anonymous and an alternative to AA, which I haven't talked about yet, but it's something called SMART Recovery, and SMART stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. Basic summary of the SMART method is it's secular and has a proven track record since 1994. They promote and ground their entire programming on being evidence-based, so they adjust as like new studies and things come out. And really, it's very similar tactics for and like an approach for AA, sort of building that sense of community. Everyone circled up, focused on their own journey of recovery. In particular, how to engage with or find these resources. I'm going to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. There is an app that you can find on any phone. It's called the Meeting Guide. And so if you download that app, you can look up your current location, and it will tell you based on where you are, you can enter in a radius. So I'm actually going to just do this live. So it is Monday afternoon right now for me, and I am marking to look within 15 miles of me, and between right now, which is again the early afternoon, and this evening, I am counting well over 20 meetings that I could attend. And again, if I cycle up to all the meetings that have occurred today, it looks like within a 15-mile radius, that number goes well over 40. So this is an incredibly helpful and useful guide and tool to have at your disposal. As I've been traveling during my time in recovery, I'll pull it up and I'll go to meetings when I'm on the road if I have the feeling that I want to get in the rooms of AA or hit up a meeting at all. Again, Googling AA meetings near me will always be tried and true method. Same with the SMART recovery. SMART is not as broad, so you don't have as many meeting options. But for those that feel like AA might not be the good fit, there are other alternatives. And again, all you have to do is look for alternatives to AA. So these again are the zero cost, like start today type activities that you can do. The one caveat that I would throw in is in regards to AA, like you can show up and sit there. And that's, again, I will state that's like the bravest thing I guarantee that you will do in your life up to that point. But things get so much more meaningful and things progress so in such a better manner when you decide to put in the work. I will be honest, I would have loved if the path that I could have taken was to just start accepting my alcoholism and attending AA meetings. It would have been less disruptive. It would have been less of a cost burden and time burden for my family. But again, that's not how my story played out. I had no ability myself to admit that I had a problem with alcohol. I needed to go down the route that I went. The next step up and the next set of options or alternatives with regards to seeking help is to search out a counselor for individual therapy. I would highly recommend searching for one that specializes in drug and alcohol addiction. I do and have found, by the way, in my time dealing with my addiction, I think I saw like 5 or 6 different therapists. Granted, not all of them were seen genuinely or with a whole heart or with any sort of desire to heal, but more so to make someone else feel like I was giving effort. And so because of that, I've seen a wide range of therapists. I never really gave it its full chance. I was never fully honest in those sessions. However, when I did enter recovery, I did have individual therapy sessions, and I found, based on my experience, that it's a huge bonus if the therapist that you can meet with is also a recovered addict or alcoholic themselves. It transforms the conversation. It's not entirely necessary. I mean, necessary in terms of helping you get on the road to recovery. It is just something I've noticed. I had a lot deeper and more meaningful conversations with therapists that I had that in common with. With that being said, a few things I want to highlight with the individual therapy route. Therapists are really hard to come by. They are booked up. It can take a long time to get on their schedules. And honestly, you might not gel with the first therapist that you meet. And that was one of my problems early on, is I feel like the time period where I may have been open to addressing the issue and being genuine about my pursuit of figuring out my problem with alcoholism, I don't think I got along or gelled with my therapist in a manner to truly let that blossom into something that could have helped me early in my days of struggling with alcoholism. So it is a very, very personal relationship. So make sure you're comfortable with it. From a cost perspective, therapists can run something upwards of $150 per meeting. Usually they'll run things through your insurance. Companies do, if you have insurance coverage or work for a larger corporation, a lot of companies have employee assistance programs, which will sort of like cover the cost of the first few sessions, sometimes upwards of like half a dozen or more. So the cost doesn't become much of any barrier at all. The other thing with regards to individual therapy is there's numerous sort of modalities that you can select from as you look at engaging with and pursuing healing with a therapist. I'm going to call out a couple of the modalities that continually come up in the world of alcoholism and addiction. There are so many out there, and there are so many subcomponents even to these three that I'm going to list out. The first one is called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Really, the premise of CBT is analyzing how your thoughts turn into emotions, how those emotions turn into behaviors. And then kind of one additional step, especially for the alcoholic, is analyze how those behaviors turn into consequences and how all of that sort of feeds back on itself. And really what you're trying to do is modify or replace the current state of that flow. So just like as an example, I guess this isn't a concrete example, but when I was in the throes of my alcoholism, like I viewed everything through such like a negative lens, and it was just like the world was out to get me. And so I would encounter a situation, I mean, take something stupid, like from work, where I would get someone who criticized something about my work, and my thought patterns or my like emotions that would crop up from that experience would be like, well, they're out to get me. They're trying to replace me, or they're trying to take my job, and like absolutely ridiculous things. Whereas, after going through a lot of therapy sessions and kind of diving into the realm of CBT, like the way that those thoughts and emotions play out now is in this situation in particular is like, well, they're just trying to help me, and maybe they're trying to better the entire team in this case. And so there's examples across my life that and experience that I can pull out as it relates to CBT. And honestly, in my situation, and from approaching these therapy modalities, like CBT was the one that stood out as most beneficial to me and most aligned with just kind of like myself as sort of a goal-oriented person. CBT is focusing less on like root cause analysis or diagnosis, and just more on the replacement of those thought patterns, or the disruption of those thought patterns to lead to different action and outcomes. Really, CBT is challenging some harmful beliefs, confronting fears. You can do role playing to improve on like your social interactions and reactions. And then overall, the outcome is crafting strategies to stop your drinking of alcohol or drug use in the world of addiction. Overall, CBT is very powerful and useful in the world of addiction treatment. Another type of therapy is called dialectic behavior therapy, or DBT. I understand and know less about DBT. I have participated in a few sessions. Well, I should say, like, I'm actually very well practiced in some of the outcomes of DBT. I just haven't been through the formal like training with a therapist. So DBT is focused on accepting your present state and understanding that the world is constantly in a state of change. And it really promotes practices which teach individuals to live in the present moment, avoid dwelling in the past, and avoid future tripping. It's really working towards managing the emotions and getting more resilient with regards to your emotional regulation, and facilitating honest communication about where you are in the present state. And again, the ultimate goal with DBT is for patients to embrace positive change. Again, with the underlying principle or assumption that change is always occurring. And then finally, I didn't know how to classify this one. I didn't spend a ton of time digging, but there's sort of more so the trauma and talk therapy aspect to all of this. So this is, like I had mentioned with CBT, where they're not doing a deep dive root cause analysis for your underlying thought patterns and emotions and behaviors. Trauma therapy is doing more of that digging into why you think the way you think, or why your emotions take you one way or another towards a behavior. So it is really focused on addressing those past traumas and trying to understand how they influence your current thought patterns and self-perception. Again, with my experience in going through accepting my alcoholism, I am truly convinced that you actually don't need a resounding and crystal clear understanding of the root cause of your issue, whether it's alcoholism or a trauma specific issue. However, I do feel it's helpful to at least have that understanding. So what I mean by that is I accepted myself as an alcoholic before I really understood the forces and the mechanisms that were at play that truly made me an alcoholic, stemming back for me to the spring of 2010. So that's an overview of sort of what I would classify as individual counseling with a therapist, sort of that classic talk therapy type stuff. Interspersed in all of that are methods like exposure therapy and things like that. So the rabbit hole is deep there, but I just wanted to highlight the few items that continually crop up in the world of recovery. The next step that I'm going to take is more of a outpatient therapy lens. And so this is stepping up into bigger groups of people that are more deliberate and time boxed with regards to when you show up, what you're doing when you show up, and you're starting to trend more and more towards that intensive inpatient rehab experience. So outpatient therapy options out there, the two biggest ones are called intensive outpatient, or IOP, and partial hospitalization program, or PHP. The names are super crappy, and especially PHP, partial hospitalization program, makes it seem much more intense than it really is. So both of them involve you reporting to a location for a majority of your time, which focuses on group therapy and activities and has individual one-on-one therapy interspersed during that time. So I'll go into my example and experience with both IOP and PHP after I give kind of a higher level overview, just to paint the picture a little more clear. Most outpatient therapies, IOP or PHP, do, or at least should, provide some family assistance, because this is really taking a larger step in your recovery journey and seeking a solution. And what these family assistance programs do is help your family or loved ones, whoever wants to, integrate the work that you are doing in these sessions to deal with your addiction back into their lives and your life, and just kind of understand how you're progressing and what you're experiencing. One thing that I learned in rehab is just we were spending so much time and energy just focus on ourselves and focus on our own improvements that it's our families and loved ones on the outside, they didn't get to see that progression. And it is really difficult to explain the potential transformative impacts of that kind of time. And so you do see a pretty large rift that can build up between family members who are on the outside and individuals who are seeking help that are really putting in the work. If there is not that guidance to sort of bring family members along, and that's what these family assistance programs do really well. And just for reference, like what that looked like for my family was 1 hour every Saturday. The rehab facility that I went to had a family session that just kind of covered a topic that was important to deliver to the family of someone who is going through rehab. So it's like they covered our schedule. They kind of covered some of this stuff that I'm talking through, like the experiences that we would have and some of the mechanisms behind our addiction and things like that. So it did wind up being very helpful. It started conversations that were really important post rehab for me. Outpatient therapy is generally billed through insurance. You're not really going to see a price listed for these. It's entirely dependent on your insurance. But again, I want to call out from like a monetary perspective, like pursue the healing and let the finances and the monetary side of things take care of themselves. There are mechanisms, there are ways out there to get all of this paid for. Differentiating between the two, IOP is generally less time sensitive, but can be a little bit more drawn out. So what I mean by that is an example IOP schedule is something like this: 3-hour sessions, 3 days per week, either a morning or an evening session like 9 to noon or 6 to 9 p.m. So if you're working, you can still work and then hit the IOP sessions in the evening. Or if you work night shifts, you can hit the morning sessions. Those 3-hour sessions, 3 days per week, might last upwards of 8 weeks. In the example of PHP, you have 6-hour sessions, 5 days a week. And what that might look like is that your PHP time only lasts 3 full weeks or 4 weeks, something along those lines. And there is sort of a graduation process that goes into all of this. So I'll start getting into my example here. So I left rehab, my 28-day intensive rehab facility, and I stepped right into a PHP program. So again, that's 6 hours a day, every single day, Monday through Friday, that I was reporting to this site and doing group therapy and stuff like that. I ran my PHP program for 3 weeks, and then I stepped into the IOP program where I was attending those sessions Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning. And then I went back to work. So that was kind of my like graduated approach to getting myself back to work. I know that sometimes going from the intensive rehab experience and jumping right back into the working world, honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. I think there's an integration that you have to work and a reestablishment of what your new normal is. Honestly, we're going to do a deep dive on rehab coming up, and so I'm going to save some of that for a later podcast. So again, either of these can be used as an intermediary step. I did detail what my process was like with each one. Or you can use one or the other as your sole standalone choice for treatment. So with the differences, again, were the time. In addition, like the IOP example was really just focused on group therapy sessions. We would cover a topic, or we would have people report out or read out on some of the work that they were doing, some of the assignments that they had. And really you can come in at any point that you want. There's no like start date for most of these IOP sessions. You just kind of like, hey, when you've hit your low point, you step into the rooms and you start the work. The PHP, in addition to doing these group therapy sessions, in the case of the place that I went, it overlapped with the IOP group. So the morning that I was doing PHP, I was with some people that were in the IOP program. And then at lunch, the IOP folks left and went about their day. We ate lunch there at the facility and then hopped right into afternoon sessions, which focus on some of these healing modalities I was referencing earlier. So we would do mindfulness practice, we would do yoga, art therapy, other activities to, again, like promote our healing and our self-reflection. Many locations that offer these outpatient treatment opportunities have partner inpatient rehab facilities that they work closely with. Or they could be a standalone outpatient facility. With regards to both rehab and inpatient rehab and outpatient facilities, I would just highly recommend when you're considering, like, take the easy route and just do a Google review. Like, I'm very well familiar with the recovery space here in the Boise area. And I will just say that what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've experienced, the Google reviews are spot on for these places. Now, you always have to read it with a lens of a little bit of skepticism, but from what I've seen, and I did do some poking around in preparation for this podcast, the ratings for the facilities in the area here that I'm familiar with are absolutely correct based on my experience. Once again, I want to highlight and call out that, like, the facilities, whether it's inpatient rehab or one of these outpatient IOP, PHP, massive kudos to them if they have addicts or alcoholics who are currently in recovery working for them. As an example, one of my group leads in my aftercare, so my outpatient, both PHP and IOP, was a 20 years recovered from heroin. And at the rehab facility that I was at, they had not only the therapists, that the vast majority of them were recovered addicts, but all the technicians who were just kind of making sure the day-to-day operations of the place were up and running. Every single technician was a recovered alcoholic or a recovered addict. And all of them stated emphatically that working at the facility helped them on their recovery journey. That is one of the key aspects that I've realized you should be looking for in a rehab facility. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it does tie in with the IOP and PHP as well. There is just nothing as powerful for a suffering alcoholic or addict to sit down and to work with an alcoholic who has found the solution. And that exists in the world of, these alternatives for seeking the solution yourself. So finally, the last kind of like high level alternative, what I will call the most disruptive, the most time intensive, the most, the potential highest monetary impact is your intensive inpatient rehabilitation center, AKA rehab, as it's classically known. So I do want to flag, I'm actually planning on doing a deep dive session on the ins and outs of rehab with a friend of mine from North Point. And in that session, we are going to cover the decision, how we made the decision to choose rehab over all these other alternatives, and then what our experience was like in rehab. But from a high level, I do want to call out, there's a high amount of variety that you'll find with intensive inpatient care. I have opinions at this point, and here are a few of the most important ones in my mind. I believe you need to have a minimum of 28 days. You require, as an alcoholic, a reset and a change of setting to allow you to form new habits and to truly let that reset sink in. I will be honest, the first 3 to 7 days that you're in rehab is just going to feel and seem surreal. And I don't think you can actually buckle down and start doing the work until after that sort of initial shock has subsided. And so what the 28 days allows you is that 3-week time period that it takes to form a new habit. So again, look for a minimum of 28-day long program. The facility that you are going to should have entirely in-house the capabilities of facilitating a medical detox program. This is a question that I would flag and raise to you to ask if you call or if you're looking at any FAQ, but it's entirely important that the facility have the capabilities of running their own medical detox program. And this is just purely for the safety of the individuals that are going through there. It's a major red flag to me if there's a rehab facility. I don't even know if they should have their license, in all honesty, but they have to have nursing stations, pharmacies on staff, and the ability to run that medical detox program. Generally speaking, when you talk to the facility or when you look at their page, they should care about you as the patient and your recovery first. Billing insurance should be at the very highest a secondary thing. There are facilities that I've heard about where you call them and the first question that they're going to ask is, can you share your insurance information? That should be a red flag. I'm going to say it again because I found it so important and imperative to my experience. Having employees on site that are recovering addicts or alcoholics themselves says a lot about the program and the mission of the facility that you are looking at. The fact that so many alumni were engaged in wanting to come back and lend their time and energy towards the site means a lot. On that note, I do believe it's an indication of a strong facility that they have an alumni network. As an example, North Point runs an alumni meeting every single Friday night of the year. So at any point, I can head back at 7 p.m. on a Friday and attend the alumni meeting. And it's in attendance with patients that are currently in, as well as alumni from any time in the past that have gone and spent time in the walls of North Point. This is an opinion, but I truly believe your distraction should be limited in rehab. What that means is no phones, no outside unsupervised activities, and limitations on your visiting hours. These things were barriers to me at first and things that I took issue with. Like I was very wary of the fact that I was not going to have a phone on me the whole time and that anything that we did outside was highly supervised, and that I only got an hour and a half with my child and my wife every single week. However, reflecting back, that allowed me to focus in intensely. I can't even imagine having your phone with you during these sessions and having the draw and the pull of social media and just all the distracting apps. Like your time, if you're committing to rehab, freaking focus in on your recovery. You will never get an opportunity like this again, or you should not get an opportunity like this again in your life. So do the work. Again, I called this out before, but just to paint the example of what a Google search will show you in terms of confidence and rating of sites. There's one rehab facility here in the Boise area that has a 2.6 rating. Where I went at North Point has a 4.8 out of 5 rating. Those align with everything that I've heard in the world of recovery here in Boise. So that should be a very key indicator for you. Finally, and this is getting into quite some detail, but as you're looking at their website, as you're having conversations with folks about it, if you choose to do so, make sure that there are references and citations to how they build their programming out. And what I mean by programming in detail is how do they structure your day? In this day and age, with our connectivity, with our sharing of learnings, with our broad access to information, every single program should be evidence-based. There is no reason that a rehab facility should be running and gunning on their own. Like everything should be grounded in sound science and results. So it's hard to imagine, but there is so much more to talk about, especially on the intensive inpatient rehab. So I'm, again, going to be doing a deep dive with a friend very, very soon on the podcast. And I'm oddly excited to bring this to you because when individuals reach out to me with questions or wanting to talk about their own struggles, one of the first items that always comes up is, so what should I do? Where do I go? What are my options? What can I do next about it? And so my hope is that this podcast kind of lays the groundwork for that and lets you jump off and inform yourself or just like commit to something. And that's probably where I want to end this. I think there's no perfect answer for anyone out there. What's going to change your situation, what's going to make your life better is just taking action. You cannot go wrong selecting one of these methods to pursue your own recovery. So just do something. Go after it, select one, and just put everything you have into it because your life does depend on it. Our lives as addicts and alcoholics depends on the maintenance and upkeep of our ability to stay on the path of recovery. So that's all I've got for this week. Thank you all. Love you much. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time, all the best.